Hey guys, I know that you've been waiting since Friday to find out how good of a guesser you are, so let's get into this. Here's the answers to last week's What's That Thing? Thing number one, remember it looked like this. I'm going to show you some other examples of ones that are similar. I find them to be somewhat creepy, but here's another one. This one's especially creepy. They are just cups, you guys, just fancy cups from way back in the day when parties and get-togethers were really an important thing. I don't know. I feel like maybe we're going to feel like parties and get-togethers are a really important thing as soon as this quarantine's over. All right, thing number two looked like this. I said it could fit into the palm of your hand. It's fancy. I wish I had one. It's just a whistle, but isn't it cool looking? All right, middle-age whistle. Thing number three looked like this thing. I said it was pretty big, like 3 feet long, 4 feet long by 2.5 feet wide. And it's just a two-man saw that was used back in the Middle Ages to cut stuff, really big stuff. Okay, these things are crazy looking. I find them to be really, really peculiar. But they are clogs. I don't know if you guys know what clogs are, but I want to show you a couple different pictures. They were used in the Middle Ages, in particular by the Vikings, which I find that crazy, but you strap them onto your shoe or onto your boot to keep yourself out of the mud. But I don't know, I find them really crazy with this long pointy thing, but you can see like these are very dirty. So yeah, there must have been a real mud issue. I don't know. All right, this thing I think is super cool. Thing number five, not a fancy acorn. This thing is, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it. A Middle Ages grenade. All right, so I want to tell you about this because we like talking about war. They did not have explosives at this point in time. They weren't, nothing was exploding. So it's not like grenades today where you throw it and there's a big boom. Um, all they had was projectiles. In other words, like a cannonball. It did not explode. It flew at you, it hit you, hit whatever, and damaged something very, very badly. These hand grenades, this top cap came off, and they would fill the inside of it with oil. Okay. And then they would have a string around the top of it that would be on fire. So this like twine would be on fire. When it hit the ground, this cap would pop off, and the twine that had been tied on there that was lit on fire, think of like a torch or something that was lit on fire, it would ignite the oil and it would start a massive fire. That oil would start spreading out and it would start this huge fire. So that's what these hand grenades were really about, was setting things on fire. It wasn't about explosives, but still pretty cool. All right, thing number six, I find this thing to be very creepy, but I think that some of you would think it's kind of cool. This was something that was used by ancient Middle Ages witches. And if you've ever seen Robin Hood, which we're going to be talking about in this chapter, there was the kind of this witch lady that was in there. In the Middle Ages, there was this belief that there was women who could make predictions about the future. Think of like prophecies that we've talked about from other civilizations. And they would be identified by this necklace that they would wear that had this crystal inside of it. And if you saw a woman walking around with one of those on, you could assume and probably be correct that she practiced some kind of witchcraft or sorcery or something like that. Women that have been found, like their bodies, their remains have been found that were wearing these, have been tied directly to like that kind of practice. And we're going to talk, I guess, a little bit about that. You're definitely going to talk about it next year in social studies because you're going to be learning about the Salem witch trials, right? Where they thought that there was witches living in this colony in America when America was first settled by the Pilgrims, and that witchcraft had been practiced. And that concept or that idea had come from Europe, what we're talking about in this chapter during the Middle Ages. All right, let's move on. Thing number seven. This thing is really unusual, and I would be really surprised if any of you got it. If you did, like seriously, high five yourself, give yourself some big brain points. This thing is a holy relic. And it is stored in a church. I can't remember the name of the church, but it's in Belgium, in Europe. And it's a vial. So think of a vial where, like, you have blood taken out of your arm and it goes into a vial. What this vial holds what they believe is the blood of Jesus from when he was crucified. Hi, Sammy. When he was crucified. They believe that it has some of the clothing and his actual blood on it. It's sealed inside of this vial, and it's stored at this church. It has not been opened since, I believe, somewhere around the 1400s. It was discovered, I think they say, around 1200, and taken into a church, and it's been stored there and sealed ever since then, and no one has opened it. But artifacts that were found with it suggest that what is inside of there is clothing and blood of Jesus. All right. Thing number 8. This thing is so creepy. So this thing is called a man catcher, and it would be used in the Middle Ages to catch people who had run away, criminals. I don't know so much about slaves, but in particular, people who owed other people money. I find this thing to be terrifying. But what happens is these are spring loaded. So when you press this end up against a person, these pieces come forward to allow your head to slip in there. Now, this one is a super dangerous looking one because it has these terrible spikes. And if you get in it and you start to fight, you're going to have some serious damage. But it can go around your leg. So they were used to clamp around the leg or around your neck to get hold of someone. I'm going to show you a different version of it that was probably more common at that time. Again, they come up, run usually on horse. You'd have to be pretty skilled at doing this because this is, not the easiest thing in the world to accomplish. But run up on someone with a horse, and then their head would slip right in here, and then they could not get themselves out. It would give you enough time to hop off your horse and get a hold of this person and hold them accountable for whatever it is that they're in trouble for. So it's creepy and weird and kind of cool. All right, here we go. Thing number 9. Yes, this thing is creepy. I really hope you guys know what it is. I'm betting that some of you got this right. This is a doctor's hood from the bubonic plague. I had somebody ask me in a live stream the other day, is that bubonic plague or bubonic plague? And it's called bubonic plague. And it got the name after the sores that people got all over their skin if they had contracted the bubonic plague. Those little sores were called buboes, and that's where the name bubonic plague comes from. So these doctors would come to treat people who had caught the bubonic plague, and they were so afraid. They knew it was extremely contagious. They did not know how to keep it away. They didn't know anything about microscopes or organisms or cells. They didn't know any of that stuff yet. They didn't know about viruses and bacteria. So they didn't know how it was transmitted, but they did know that it was extremely contagious and that people who had been exposed to other people that had it were getting it too. Doesn't it sound a lot like what we're dealing with right now? So what these doctors would do is they would wear an outfit kind of like what you see in this picture. It would be primarily made of leather. It would go from head to toe. You would wear this leather jacket that had a hood that came up over top of it. And then you would have this hood underneath it. So you can kind of see that this guy has this hood on. This beak would be stuffed with spices because they believed that if they had something inside of that beak, that when you breathe through it, it would filter the spice, or the grain of the spice would filter whatever it was in the air out so that you wouldn't catch it. The eye holes were made with pieces of glass so that even air couldn't get through the eye holes. So they put this over their head, and then they would put this long cape on over top of that to make sure they were entirely sealed up. They would wear leather gloves, sometimes cap it off with a hat just to make sure that everything was secure. But the problem is that it was not strong enough or powerful enough to keep the germs out. And these doctors were catching the bubonic plague just as quickly as anyone else. I am going to be talking a lot about the bubonic plague in this chapter. I'll try not to keep it too gross. I'll give you a warning when it does get gross, but get ready because that is going to be coming. All right, thing 10. Oh, this This thing is creepy too. So this directly ties into the bubonic plague. So they've got all these people who are really, really sick, and the doctors are trying to figure out how to save people. Just on the side, as a side note, if you caught the bubonic plague from the time that you had been exposed until the time that you would die from it, it was almost impossible to survive it in ancient times. Today, occasionally you hear about somebody catching it, and more than likely they will survive it because we know how to treat it. There's no cure for it, but we know how to treat it. Back then they didn't know how to treat it. You had about a week. So from the time that you first had symptoms until you died, it was about a week long. So doctors were trying all kinds of things, and I'm going to tell you some things that are going to blow your mind in this chapter that they were doing to try to cure bubonic plague. But one of them was this practice called bloodletting, and they thought that if they essentially drained you of most of your blood, that you would get rid of whatever this disease was, and that your body would produce new blood and you would begin to heal and become healthy again. So they couldn't drain everything out, right? That would kill you. But every few days they would come and do this to you so that you could start producing some new blood and some red and white blood cells. So this device, you flick this little lever right here, and these are blades that pop out, and they would cut you in your arm. Think about when you go to the doctor and you get an IV, if you've ever had an IV put in your arm, they normally do it at your elbow because you have a big vein that runs through there. So they would cut you right here with these blades. They would drain your blood, usually between 1 and 2 liters of blood. So think of a 2 liter pop bottle, how big that is. Most of the time, it was close to 2 liters of blood that they would take from you before they would bandage you all up and get the bleeding to stop, and then come back and do it again later. All right, I hope you guys are entirely creeped out and grossed out by these Middle Ages people. They definitely were unique, and a lot of it has to do with these really tough things that they were going through, crazy challenges that they were going through. There was more than the bubonic plague. There was a massive war that was going on, and it went on for generations called the Crusades. We're going to be talking about that in this chapter too. This is going to be a good, interesting chapter for you guys and for us to wrap up our school year. So I hope you're excited to learn about it. I'm excited to tell you about it. I hope you're doing well. Take care, guys.